Democrats have been on a statue jihad since the summer of love. Christopher Columbus, Teddy Roosevelt, George Washington, even Honest Abe, even Frederick Douglass all got torn down. Statues are important. They tell the American story. But the left wants to desecrate and forget our heroes and erect their own statues. In Times Square, a giant statue of a black woman just went up. And when I heard about the statue, I was open-minded. American heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Who is this woman? What did she do to get a statue? A nice one, too. Nothing. This isn't a real person. It's a DEI statue. The sculptor says she's a fictional character who's meant to contrast the statues of white men in Times Square, like Father Duffy, a World War I hero who actually accomplished something. The artist calls this fake lady a modern-day David. The contrapposto pose of her body and the ease of her stance is a subtle nod to Michelangelo's David. David was a celebration of the human form. Not sure what this statue's celebrating. If you were going to put up a fake statue, why not make her happy and healthy? Not slap a big scowl on her face and her hands on her hips. This is what they want us to aspire to be? If you work hard, you can be overweight and anonymous? They don't like real statues because it reminds them of our society's merit-based system. They want a society based on equity, where achievement isn't celebrated, equal outcomes are. So they celebrate mediocrity instead of triumph. Our nation has hundreds of statues honoring black Americans, as we should. Harriet Tubman, Duke Ellington, Jackie Robinson, Rosa Parks. We could go on and on and on. But they've built a statue in Times Square. They could have done it for Michelle Obama or Kamala Harris or Oprah Winfrey. Usually you have to earn a statue. I'd give one to Jalen Brunson. He's carrying the Knicks on his back. Anyone but a fake lady. So, what does New York think about the DEI statue?
Do you know who this one is?
No.
I have no idea, no.
Nope. I have no idea, no.
No, I do not.
Do you have any idea of maybe something that she accomplished that got her a statue?
Something with equal rights? I don't know.
Something to do with like the black community? Part of the BLM movement?
What if I told you she accomplished nothing?
Really?
It's supposed to embody everybody. Does that make sense to you?
No!
I think I feel totally represented by that.
You do?
No.
I feel like it's a good representation for New York, especially because it's towards the BBW women. And a lot
I'm sorry, what's BBW?
big black, like the big black women.
What do you think about her pose? Is that a good pose?
No, I don't think she's happy to be here.
People are comparing it to Michelangelo's David. How do you think it stacks up?
She's wearing more clothes. She's not naked. No.
Would it be better if she were?
That's a tough question.
Who do you think she voted for?
I would say Trump. I think she voted for Trump.
Probably Kamala.
Why do you think that?
Black Lives Matter.
Probably didn't vote.
Why?
Because she's stuck here the whole day. She couldn't get to the polls.
How does she make you feel?
Like a baddie.
What a beautiful piece, standing in the middle of time.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Bachaha Kodash. Double honors to head apostle, now as a great millstone, who rule well and teach well, peace and blessings to you, sincere Akim, that are pushing his truth all over the four corners of the earth, week in and week out, in our truth and sincerity. And Shalom to the elect. I want to touch on this statue of this morbidly obese so-called black woman in Times Square. And this is a 12-foot bronze statue that you see on your screen in Times Square, who supposedly, quote, challenges who should be rendered immortal. Okay, so I guess this statue, this DEI statue, has been put up in Times Square, New York, to oppose, these other statues that we've seen over the years. It says, in New York City's Times Square, a woman stands with ease and confidence Amidst throngs of tourists, she happens to be 12 feet tall. Yeah, you see the boldness on the face of this woman. And as you see, it says the DEI David, the contrapposto pose of her body and the ease of her stance is a subtle and nod to Michelangelo's David. And you could say a lot about this photo. I mean, this statue. You know, she's obviously morbidly obese. You know, this is your standard big Shirley. And when she opens your mouth, you know what type of filth you're gonna have to deal with. It says the bronze statue entitled "Grounded in the Stars" is one of two art illustrations by British artist Thomas J. Price, whose work is challenging people's assumptions about identity and representation. And the majority of these so-called black women support this. When they see this image, they're going to go to it. They're going to say, this is amazing. Isn't this great? We got our own statue in New York City. It kind of looks like me. That's what they're going to say, because the majority of the so-called black women, they're overweight. They're out of shape. And you just know that hair on her head right there, it ain't real. Okay? It says, creating a moment for reflection in the Fretnik, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, body-filled public space, the young woman dressed in contemporary clothes but posed like Michelangelo's David has caught the attention of the art world and passerby alike. The intention of my public works, quote, is to become part of the place of inhabit and its physical material history, as well as the visitors that pass through and around the location, no matter how fleeting, Price said in a statement posted on Times Square website. Grounded in the Stars will be on view until Tuesday, June 17th at the intersection of Broadway Avenue and 46th Street. It says the artist did not immediately respond to people's requests for comment. It says through scale, Salakia, material, and posture, Grounded in the Stars disrupts traditional ideas about what defines a triumphant figure. Reads the installation description and challenges who should be rendered immortal through monumentalization. Okay, so the black woman, the reliable black woman, has been monumentalized. And the so-called black woman, as well as the majority of all the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American women, they're in cahoots with Esau Edom, okay? But even more so the so-called black woman. And we're going to go to Genesis, the 3rd chapter. Let me finish this article out real quick. It says prices, matter of fact, let's skip down a little bit. It says the artist said he wants to bind intimate emotional state that allow for deeper reflection around the human condition and greater cultural diversity. Okay, so, and this is just a mockery. This is just laughable, man. Okay, and this is what Esau Edom, wants you so-called black woman to be like. This is what you should be, idolizing. Okay, in the eyes of Esau Edom. This is what you so-called black woman should be, looking to be bold, to make a statement, to be loud, clamorous. The scriptures say, give not these women liberty. Well, these women have been given great, great liberty, especially over here in Babylon the Great. I mean, look, they didn't give the so-called black woman, Big Shirley, her own statue in Times Square. Hey, that's the definition of liberty. Okay? And Esau Edom has set up various different programs, benefits, set up various different establishments and avenues for the so-called black woman, and not just the so-called black woman, but all you so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American women. Okay? And a woman essentially has been set up over the man. Okay. Let's go to Genesis, the 3rd chapter, real quick. Because what you got to understand is that Esau Edom uses Eve to push his agendas, to persuade you so-called Negro, Latino, or Native American men. Okay. So the so-called black woman is a device for Esau. And he is using it very, very well. Okay. Hey, he's using the so-called black woman for him to ultimately raise, the children. He's gotten the man out the house. He's bound the strong man, and he has swooped in and, used the weaker vessel to push his philosophies, his doctrines, his agendas, to effeminate, the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American man. Let's go to Genesis chapter 3. Let's start verse 1. It says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, and that serpent was a man." It says, "which the Lord Yahweh had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, had Yahweh said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" Verse 2. "And the Lord said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Yahweh has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." Okay, and that fruit and those trees are not talking about actual trees and actual fruit, an actual apple like a so-called Christian would like you to believe. Okay, these are philosophies. It says, "And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For Yahweh doth not know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." And that same serpent today is whispered in the ears of Eve. All these various different philosophies, all these various different types of things, and a mindset and a way to be. Feminism. You don't need no man. You can raise these kids on your own. I got you, girl. I'm going to set you in this program. I'm going to give you free housing. I'm going to put on you in these various different benefits so you can survive and you can raise your children, You're black and beautiful, right? No matter how overweight you are, no matter how overshaped you are, okay? And, the studies that have been done that show that when there's a single parent household, especially of the so-called Negroes, it facilitates, these prison houses, murderers, moles, okay? The most likely to be suicidal, the most likely to be depressed, the most likely to be on drugs come from these single parent households, man. So this is nothing but a device that has been set up by none other than our enemy, Esau Edom. But the so-called black woman, she runs the Esau Edom for help, for guidance. She reverences Esau Edom. It says, "For Yahweh doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened." So, Eve has eaten. She has taken on what the devil has prescribed her. And she's now looking at life in a whole different manner. And on the majority standpoint, man, the so-called black woman is through, man. All right. The so-called black woman, the so-called black man don't want to deal with your ass. The rest of the tribes don't want to deal with your ass. Just like the scripture says, man. She's loud and she's stubborn. Her feet abideth not in her house. Look at this statue, man. She's in the middle of the goddamn street. And that's the majority of the so-called black woman, man. They in the streets and they for the streets. It says verse 6, and let's finish out verse 5. It says, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Hey, the so-called black woman thinks that she's a god. And even these men will persuade and teach that the so-called black woman is a god. You just had recently, I believe last camp, the elder from South Carolina, Elder Manat Zakba, had a Jake stand out there and listen to him, teach for a couple minutes. I'm not sure how long, but he did a video on it. And then Jake going, I perceive him to be a so-called black man, Judite man, but nevertheless, he gonna sit there and listen, and then come out of his mouth and say, the so-called black woman is God. Jake is through, man. Jake is through. Our men have been infeminated by what you see on the screen right here, man. Okay. Esau Edom has used the so-called black woman to raise the so-called black man in a very effeminate type manner. And they're very, very mentally weak. And that's how the so-called black woman wants her male children to be. And you can't tell her nothing, man. You look at this statue, all you can say, man, hey, man, we can. Hey, you look at this statue, man. Because, this statue, hey, this is a resemblance of how the majority of the so-called black women actually are. This is how they look. Give or take a few pounds. More so, give more few pounds. And they got a, loud mouth on them. They're very, very stubborn. They're clamorous. Like the scripture says, she knows nothing, but she still seeks advice from Esau Edom. Verse 6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and that's how Esau comes. He comes with things that are pleasant to the eyes, things that appease the flesh. Girl, you can do this, you can do that, man. Look at this. Look what we got over here. Yeah, you like that? Well, come on over here. Look what we got down here. Yeah. Come on, you got to get with this. It says, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, but to make one wise in what? To make one wise in the things of this world, the things of this life, okay? In idolatry, in witchcraft, okay? Things that are against Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. It says, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also to her husband with her, and he did eat. So the serpent was able to get to Adam through Eve. So, the same thing that happened in the garden is going on to this very day. And that serpent, once again, concerning that serpent as a man, well, guess what? That serpent is in the position of power, pursuant to Job 9:24, man. These wicked elite Edomite banking families. And they have used the so-called black woman as a device for various different purposes. Okay. So the serpent was able to get to Adam through Eve. The scriptures speak about, the woman being the weaker vessel. So the serpent didn't go directly to Adam. He went to Eve and was able to persuade Adam through Eve. Let's go over to, matter of fact, before I do that, let's go to the book of Proverbs real quick. This is Proverbs 7:11. It says, she is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Hey, you just look at this woman, she's loud. When she's about to speak, she's about to twitch her hands, move her hips, get up all in your face. She might even try to fight your ass. And when a woman that size starts swinging on you, guess what? Hey, you got to fight her like a man. Hey, you saw that security guard, man. You had a whole bunch of these right here swinging on him. Hey, he was fighting all 7, 8, 9, 10 of them, right? Going 100%. And them chicks was getting knocked down, and they was getting right back up. These morbidly obese women are, especially the so-called black women, they're full of the Chick-fil-A and McDonald's, Mr. Pibb. They're full of all these chemical products that Esau puts in these fast food restaurants, and the main consumers of these fast foods are you so-called black women. It says, she is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. Okay? And we know what that scripture is speaking about. But hey, man, yeah, you got the so-called black woman at the corner, at Times Square, man. For all the people to look at. This is a sign of, this is Esau showing you that his success, and it's ultimately really a mockery, to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Out of all the various different type of so-called black women, concerning a figure could be established as a monument in Times Square, this is what they gave you. They gave you a big Shirley. Man, this place is done. This place is through, man. Let's go to Sirach chapter 22. And then there's another picture too that, I caught wind of this, and this is supposed to be in Times Square, but don't quote me on it. Fact check me. I need to do some research and find out if this is actually a monument, as well in Times Square. But, the headline was in Times Square as well. So I don't know, but I would not be surprised. This is Sirach 22 and 5. It says, she that is bold dishonors both her father and her husband. And the majority of the so-called black women, this is what they stand upon. Okay, they wear that as a badge of honor. You go up to the so-called black woman and say, man, you are so bold, and say it with a smile on your face. She's going to take it as a compliment. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yep, I'm independent. This is little Ray. This is the junior over here. And, I've raised them. You're doing it all by myself. Yep, that's me. It says, she that is bold dishonors both her father and her husband, but they both shall despise her. Yeah. No one wants to be around the so-called black woman. All right, Jake is getting with, the Northern Kingdom tribe. Jake is getting with heathen, man. We don't need you so-called black woman to bring back the nation of Israel, man. And that's what you so-called Negro, Latino, Native American women don't understand, that we don't need you. You need us. You're not the prize. The Israelite man is the prize. We can bring back the nation of Israel through any of these women, these other nations. All right. Yes, the so-called white woman as well. We don't need the so-called black woman. We don't need the Israelite woman in general. Let's go to Sirach, the 25th chapter. Let's go down to the 21st verse. Stumble not at the beauty of a woman, and desire her not for pleasure. Ain't nobody desiring this woman for pleasure. Ain't nobody going to look at this statue right here and honestly say at the bottom of their heart, that this is beautiful right here. Nah. Anybody who says this is beautiful or this is that or this and that, they're standing for a certain agenda. They're standing for feminism. They're saying it because they're a woman, or they're saying it because they're on TV or they're being recorded, But deep down inside, they say, this woman is ugly, man. She needs to lose some weight. Okay? Why did they make this statue like this? You know, why do her hips look like that? This is not attractive on any level at all. It says a woman, if she maintain her husband, is full of anger, impudence, and much reproach. And you can just look at this woman and you know she's angry. You know she's got something to talk about, right? It says a wicked woman abateth the courage and maketh an heavy countenance and a wounded heart. A woman that will not comfort her husband in distress maketh weak hands and feeble knees. See, Esau, Edom, he knows that. And he has used that for that very purpose. Okay. This is part of Esau, Edom's experimentation. Good movie, if you haven't seen, is They Clone Tyrone. And Esau, Edom is doing all different types of experiments over the years and currently amongst the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. It says, verse 24, of the woman came the beginning of sin, you know, like we read in Genesis, the 3rd chapter. And through her, we all die. Let's read verse 25 again, verse 25 as well. It says, give the water no passage, neither a wicked woman liberty to gad abroad. And everything has been completely disrupted. Everything has been completely taken out of order. This whole place is upside down under the rulership of Esau, Edom. And Esau has given liberty to these wicked women to do as they please, to have a voice, to have an opinion. Okay, you know, have these high-level positions in society, you know, ultimately to persuade other women to be like them, you know, to the standpoint that even the so-called white woman supports this bullshit right here, man. The so-called white woman supports the madness of the so-called black woman, man. Yeah, America's on its last leg. Let's go to Proverbs 9 and 13. I quoted this earlier. It says, a foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knoweth nothing. Yeah, these so-called, the majority of the so-called black woman and you know, as well as, you know, the rest of you Israelite women on a majority standpoint. Okay. But, you know, I feel like the so-called black woman, you know, has it the heaviest. Has no type of morals. Okay. It has no type of respect for herself. And is all about pleasure. And what's that scripture? She that liveth in pleasure. You know, hey, food is a pleasure, man. You know, food is also a drug. And, you know, the so-called black woman doesn't have any type of discipline. All right, let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 5. You know, the so-called black woman don't have no type of discipline. That's why she just keeps eating and eating and eating. And she expects you to choose her, to pick her. And Esau's giving you various different celebrities and musical artists that are morbidly obese to support and fuel your desires, okay, and your delusion. This is 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 6. It says, but she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. And that's what, you know, a majority of our women are seeking is pleasure, man. Okay. They're not concerned about the truth. They're not concerned about Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. They're not concerned with their diet. They're not concerned about being healthy, living healthy. All right. They're not concerned about none of that, man. Let's go to Isaiah, the 3rd chapter. Let's start at verse 16. It says, moreover, the Lord saith, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, making a tinkling with their feet. Hey, this image is an epitome of that, man. prideful, haughty, the hand on the hips, the wanton eyes. And this chapter is gonna get into the hair or the lack thereof. It says, verse 17, therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet and their calls and their round tires like the moon. Yeah, so the Lord put a curse on the so-called black woman. And the majority of the so-called black women, that's why they can't grow their hair out. You know, the so-called black man can grow his hair longer than the so-called black woman. So the Lord has taken the glory of the so-called black woman away from her concerning her hair. And these women resort to wearing weaves and wigs, which, that hair that they get, which ultimately has been sacrificed to gods, and shipped over here to Babylon the Great, and you put it on your head, which that's another lesson for another time. It says, in that day, the Lord will take away their bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet and their calls and their round tires like the moon. Yeah, all your various different assets you've gotten under Esau, Edom, your comfort is going to be taken away from you. All right. It says the chains and bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of legs and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and nose jewels, the changing suits of apparel, and the mantles and the whipples and the crisping pins, the glasses and the fine linen and the hoods and the vials. And it shall come to pass that instead of a sweet smell, there shall be a stink. And instead of a girdle, a rent. Hey, man, a big old belly, a smell to go with that belly, and baldness on her head. Let's read that again. Isaiah 3:24, it says, and it shall come to pass that instead of a sweet smell, there shall be a stink, and instead of a girdle, a rent, and instead of well-set hair, baldness, and instead of a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty. Lord willing, this was edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachaha Kodash. Double honors to the head apostle, Nettles, a great millstone, who rule well and teach well, and shalom to the elect.